2 steps to your right. Take 2 steps to your right. Driver, walk straight back. Keep walking.
New body cam footage showing the moment police arrested the man the FBI says may have just apparently attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump. So what kind of answers do those images reveal? I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. And tonight, we are following more on the fallout from what the FBI is calling an apparent assassination attempt on former President Trump just about 2 months after he was shot in the ear at that rally in Pennsylvania. Now, law enforcement officials are sharing new details about that incident in a press conference a little earlier today. Take a listen.
Alleged gunman was on the public side of the fence near the 6th green. The subject, who did not have line of sight to the former president, fled the scene. He did not fire or get off any shots at our agent. The protective methodologies of the Secret Service were effective yesterday. The former president's protective apparatus allowed for the early identification of the threat and led to a safe evacuation.
Suspect has been identified as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Roth. He appeared in court this morning and has been charged with 2 federal counts so far: possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and possession of a firearm with an obliterated or erased serial number. Now, he's got a long history with law enforcement and an eyebrow-raising history with the war in Ukraine. We're going to get into both of those things in just a few moments. But first, let's talk about how we got here. Trump was playing golf at his West Palm Beach course yesterday afternoon when the Secret Service says that an agent saw the muzzle of a rifle peeking out of a fence in some bushes. The agent shot at the suspect, who took off on foot, leaving the rifle and other items behind. He then got into a car, tried to escape. That's when officers caught up to him on a freeway. NBC News got an exclusive look at body cam footage, which shows the moment he was handcuffed and arrested on the side of the road.
Driver, walk straight back. Keep walking.
What's your name, Austin? Ryan?
And Trump has responded to the incident on his social accounts, blaming Democrats, especially his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, for the violent threats against him, saying, quote, "Because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying and it will only get worse." NBC's Jesse Kirsch has more on all of it.
Gadi, we're learning more about the history of this suspect criminally, as well as on the day leading up to this incident. According to authorities, based on cell phone data they've reviewed, the suspect, Ryan Ruth, spent around 12 hours in this area around the golf course before this incident, which led to Secret Service firing shots at him, and then the suspect allegedly fleeing the area about 40 minutes in a car north on the highway, based on us driving that same stretch of roadway. I want to show you, you can see behind me here, this is the entrance to the golf club. A lot of the shrubs around here are high and thick, and what officials have told us is that there's a Secret Service agent who typically goes in front of former President Trump when he's playing golf, goes about a hole in front of him to survey the area in front of the former president. And during one of those surveys, a hole ahead of the former president yesterday, according to officials, a Secret Service agent spotted a gun barrel pointing toward the golf course, and that is what led to this interaction with law enforcement firing at the suspect fleeing. We have learned late today at a press conference from authorities that the suspect, Ryan Ruth, apparently never had line of sight on the former president and never fired a shot at Secret Service. There was a question earlier as to whether or not the suspect may have fired shots, but that, we're told, did not happen. We're also learning more about Ryan Ruth's criminal background, which extends more than 2 decades ago. He was convicted in North Carolina in 2002 of possession of a weapon of mass destruction. He was in court today for a first appearance here in Florida, and according to our team that was inside the courtroom, he was at one point even smiling and laughing with his public defender. He is expected back in court in the days ahead as we continue to follow the aftermath of another apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, and we've learned that his campaign is asking the Secret Service for more resources, according to two sources familiar. Gadi?
To dive a little more deeply into who Ryan Wesley Ruth is and his history, let's bring in NBC's Ellison Barber. Ellison, you are such a great conflict reporter, and I understand that during your time in Ukraine, you actually came across Ruth. Can you tell us a little bit about what that interaction was like?
Yeah, so it was the summer of 2022, and I was on a 2-month rotation. I was there all of June and all of July of that summer. And at the beginning, my producer who I was with, Kailani Koenig, and I had noticed she had noticed initially these signs that were posted in a lot of areas around Kyiv. And I think we can show you what those looked like. And there were these signs saying just this: we must have thousands of fighters to win this war. We are recruiting for all ages, genders, and skill levels. And at the bottom, there was a number and contact information, and it said Ryan, USA, with a phone number. So assuming he must be an American, Kai reached out to him, and he ended up calling her, and they had a phone call and interaction. He ended up sending her a series of different text messages where we were trying to see, is this someone who maybe we should do a story with? Ultimately, Gadi, what we decided was that we weren't going to do a formal interview with him because we couldn't verify any of the things that he was saying. I touched base with one person who worked with the Foreign Legion, a contact that I had, people I knew a little bit in the military at the time. People weren't familiar with this guy, and he wasn't telling us that he was officially working with the military. He was sort of there on his own. So it struck us as odd at different points, and we didn't have enough to verify that he was doing the things that he said he was doing. So we decided that it wouldn't be appropriate to pursue any sort of formal interview with him. That being said, he kept texting Kai and sending messages. And one night we were we were finishing a shift. We stay on East Coast time, no matter where we are, as you know, in the world. It was late in Kyiv, and we'd gotten this text message from him, and I want to read some of the messages he sent. He sent a text out of the blue that said this: the U.S. Embassy needs to use your van for 2 days. Can you call me? And then he said, I'm at and said the hotel that we were staying at, and then said ... the U.S. Embassy. My producer replied saying, I'm sorry, I don't think that is something that we can help with. He had replied saying, we got it handled. Thanks. Sorry to bug you guys. Embassy people were in the lobby. We had a conversation that night about how it sort of made both of us uncomfortable, that he seemed to be at the hotel where we were. And for us, there were some of these red flags that we just thought the behavior was maybe not of someone who was actually doing what they claimed they were doing. We knew he wasn't actually affiliated with the Ukrainian military, and they have since confirmed that, the Foreign Legion telling our producers in Ukraine they have no record of him ever being involved or working with them in any form or fashion. But then he sent her another text about a day later saying, sorry I bothered you the other night. Just emergency extraction needed. Americans in danger. So sorry. I will be free and ready this weekend. Have my vest from the base. Can bring helmet too if wanted. Let me know what you need. I was planning to travel to Odessa, which was closer to the front lines at the time. We sort of ignored that message because, again, started to feel uncomfortable with this individual who we really didn't know and hadn't met in person. I later found out, after we sort of pieced together things, my producer Kai had flagged for our security that she felt uncomfortable with this person and just wanted to make him aware of who this guy was. As I was around Kyiv in the weeks for the next little bit I was there, traveling in and out, I kept seeing him. And I noticed every time I would see him, he was really just hanging around Kyiv. This is a photo I took of him at a mall that's in Maidan Square, where I saw him on the escalator. And I took this photo, and it's grainy because I was sending it to our security detail to say, hey, FYI, I saw this guy again. One, this is where he is located, just for situational awareness for all of us. And two, I really don't think this guy is doing what he says. I find it hard to believe he is training fighters or recruiting people when I keep seeing him at restaurants and around the mall in Kyiv and alone. And you can sort of see there, half of his hair was dyed blue at the time. He often, when I would see him in passing, would be in some sort of like American flag T-shirt. He told us he was staying at a hostel there and had kind of come on his own. But for us, we never did a formal interview or story with him because it just wasn't adding up in our minds, and he didn't seem to be a legitimate source. To tell you the truth, Gadi, I thought he was someone who was sort of what I would describe as like a war chaser who shows up at these things because they want some sort of accolades or attention back home, but aren't actually doing what they say. Gadi?
Yeah, a lot of people will see and hear some of this and just jump to conspiracy conclusions, especially with some of the text messages that he sent at the beginning, pretending or possibly talking about the embassy thing.
Right.
But you just said something that I think a lot of people don't really understand because it's something that we don't really talk about, war chasing, right? There are people that for some reason are like moths to a very dystopian flame. And for you to have the foresight, I guess, or the spider senses to know that something was up, to take his pictures. I mean, looking back, did it seem like he was harmless, or did it seem like there was something more nefarious there?
You know, when I look back, I think I just thought he was odd. I thought the behavior was odd, and I thought what he was saying didn't make sense. I knew people who were with the U.S. Embassy contacts that we had. They didn't know this person. I knew they certainly weren't going to use a random person and ask to borrow vans from NBC News to extract an American from a country in a war that they weren't involved in. So it was just things again and again where he was so persistent on contacting us at that time that it just was a thing that just kept being like, something doesn't feel right. And I think that's why I took that photo and I remembered it so vividly, because I would sort of look out for him in town, because it became to me in some ways an example of, hey, we got to be careful for some of the people who are here, because a lot of people are here, particularly from the United States, doing amazing things. But we have to make sure we're vetting that. And that is what we do. And this was someone where we couldn't say definitively he wasn't doing it, but we couldn't prove it enough or fact check him enough to be able to say, okay, he is doing this. Let's do a story with him. And so we didn't. And then we sort of used whatever intuition both Kai and I had, that we had separately notified our security detail, and didn't realize it until we were talking about it just in the last 24 hours, that we had both felt uncomfortable enough to reach out separately to our security detail and say, hey, just FYI, this is where we're seeing this guy around.
Yeah, incredible to think that you were in the middle of all of that chaos and you were still able to recognize those red flags. Ellison, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You bet.
And to help us understand that Secret Service angle, NBC News law enforcement analyst and former Secret Service special agent Evie Pomporis joins us now. Evie, we've heard that this guy wrote a self-published book in which he seems to encourage an assassination attempt on the former president, or says it's okay to, I don't know, assassinate President Trump. Do you think that that should have been a red flag for law enforcement and intelligence? And how, in a self-published book, are you able to prepare for something like this?
It's actually an indicator in some instances of somebody who's going to do something. These manifestos, these books, even when they put them on social media. I mean, obviously he went as far as to write a book. Look, it's not enough. Now, did law enforcement know? And it depends what language to use. You have to make an active threat against the president. It can't be something like, I want the president gone. That's not enough. So if there's an active threat that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to the president, then yes, jurisdiction exists in which you can step in, find that person if it is known.
And this phone data that we're also hearing about today, that shows that this man was at the course for hours before that attempt was made or before that contact was made. What does that say to you about how prepared Secret Service was or possibly should be?
It's conflicting, because on the one hand, you have the Secret Service layers that worked on the golf course. You had the agent that was going out in advance, walking the perimeter, the inner perimeter, and was able to locate the gunman, the shooter, intercept it, and prevent the attack from happening. On the flip side, then you find out that the shooter was out there for 12 hours. And the question begs, okay, he was out there on the public side of the fence. But even when you look at that photo of that fence, when you see his vest hanging, that ceramic plate, the weapon, it's a really flimsy fence. It's not something that's that difficult to even get through or cut through. So it begs to differ, how much closer would he have been if that fence didn't exist? And again, if it's 12 hours, does anybody not go outside the exterior perimeter? Did anybody not walk through it? Did anybody not post any police vehicles? You know, one of the things I would do in the U.S. Secret Service and that we're trained to do is to use uniforms, marked vehicles. They're called deterrents. So even having a few of those sprinkled outside that exterior perimeter, somebody will see that, a potential shooter, and say, you know what? I'm not interested. There's obviously some kind of presence here, and turn around. So it is very alarming that that did not take place. I did hear that there was a possibility that they did use drones against. Again, if they did, maybe the drones didn't pick it up. A couple of things we would use, heat vision. Heat vision can work during the day. That's another simple piece of technology you could use to see you know, around the exterior? What bodies are there? Who's moving around? I do think that this is something that's going to be of concern. It's, on one hand, they did a great job intercepting, but on the other hand, this is coming out, and it begs the question, why were there people not at that exterior? Now, just to clarify, the Secret Service is coming out and everyone's saying it's an OTR. OTR means off the record. All that means it's not published on the president's schedule, all right? Nobody knows about it, ideally. Well, first, we're going to find out, how did that shooter know to go there on that day? Did he go there by chance thinking, well, you know, it's a Sunday, it's a weekend, it's a chance he might go, I'm going to stake out and see? Was he tipped off? Did he get some information? That's one. But you want to really find out what was going on and how he got that information.
And that's a lot of questions there that hopefully we'll be getting answers to in the coming months. Evie, thanks so much for joining us. And in Springfield, Ohio, the community there faces unrest after former President Donald Trump repeated unsubstantiated claims that Haitian immigrants there are eating pets. Now, elementary schools have been evacuated. College campuses are going virtual. Hospitals are in lockdown. And government buildings and community centers are being forced to close. And just a few hours ago, the city counciled next week's Springfield two-day Culture Fest over those same violent threats. Now, the Ohio governor says police have been forced to investigate at least 33 bomb threats so far. Luckily, none of them have panned out. And authorities in Springfield maintain there is no evidence of immigrant communities harming pets. But yesterday on CNN, Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, doubled down on the baseless claims.
The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to, create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do.
Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa. Maggie, so can you walk us through the chaos in the town right now? And I got to ask, why are schools getting bomb threats?
I mean, it boggles the mind, Gadi. No one, or at least authorities haven't told us if anyone sending these threats, emailing them, calling them in, has said why they're targeting schools, even if it's tied to these baseless claims and these rumors. But that being said, we have video of Kenwood Elementary. That was one of the ones that was targeted today. So it was like, here we go again, another day, another series of threats. We got an statement emailed in from the school district. They said, quote, based on information received from the Springfield Police Division, so local police, that elementary school and another one, Simon Kenton, students were evacuated from their buildings to an alternate district location. They go on to say these are the 5th and 6th threats that the school district has received in the last week. As you said, overall, Springfield facilities, including hospitals, government buildings, college campuses, there have been 33 threats this week so far. And today the governor talked about all of the chaos, but specifically zeroed in on the schools and how this is impacting local families. Take a listen.
Parents deserve to feel that their children are being educated and that their children are safe. We cannot let the bad guys win. Our schools must remain open. They are going to remain open.
So that being said, the governor also added, and authorities and officials also added, they're bringing in bomb-sniffing dogs to be in Springfield permanently. They're bringing in extra law enforcement. The Ohio State Division of Public Safety is evaluating different buildings, Homeland Security, evaluating different buildings to see their vulnerabilities, to see which ones could most easily be attacked. So he's making that statement there of, we're going to keep the schools open, we can't let the bad guys win, but make no mistake, they are taking a lot of extra precautions in the midst of this wave of threats, Gadi.
It's bizarre stuff. And you've been speaking to members of the Haitian community there. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, the few that would go on camera, because a lot of them are terrified, and obviously you can understand why. Case in point, there was supposed to be a community meeting at the Haitian Community Center in Springfield on Saturday night. Well, that was canceled because they said it's clearly not safe for us to get together in large numbers. I talked to one man who was at that community center, even though the meeting was canceled, and he told me stories about what people there have been enduring. This first one really stuck out to us. Listen to this.
I was talking to my friend like recently and said one of the Haitian guy got punched on his eye.
A Haitian person was punched in the face here in Springfield.
Yes.
How does that sit with, like, how do you deal with that?
Actually, that's why we're here. We're trying to help with all these kind of things. Be careful, like where you're going and where you're going to meet people, when you are gathering with people. and like phone calls, like people would call you and trying to threat you and all that. That's a lot.
And we talked about precautions people are taking. A lot of families, officials have said, are keeping their kids home from school. That goes double, according to that man, for Haitian parents who he said do not feel comfortable even just letting their kids leave the house, let alone go to schools where these threats are coming in. Gadi.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Maggie Vespa, thank you. Meanwhile, TikTok and DOJ lawyers duked it out in a federal court today over a new U.S. law that would ban the social media app as soon as January. And at the center of that case are issues about national security as well as freedom of speech. And NBC News Now morning anchor Savannah Seller has all the details.
TikTok in court today.
Save TikTok!
Getting its first chance to fight back against a law passed in April that could essentially ban the app in a matter of months. The government's concern that its Chinese-owned parent company could secretly influence Americans by manipulating what content is seen and exploiting user data.
The problem is that that same data is extremely valuable to a foreign adversary trying to compromise the security of the United States.
In heavily redacted court documents, the Justice Department and a senior U.S. intelligence official say they don't have direct evidence that China has used TikTok for propaganda in the U.S., but they say there is significant risk that could happen. TikTok arguing that's not enough.
They don't claim anything has happened yet. They claim there's future Chinese control, and therefore we can burden in a very significant way the speech of a U.S. entity and its users.
The judge is appearing sympathetic to claims from TikTok and a group of content creators that the law violates the First Amendment. But they pushed lawyers on why those protections should apply to a foreign-owned company. Right now, the app, used by 170 million Americans, is on the clock. If TikTok loses in court, it would have to sell to an American company by January, or it would face that effective ban.
Savannah Sellers, thank you. And NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. Danny, thanks for being with us. One of TikTok's main arguments here is that there are a lot of other companies owned by foreign entities, but they don't have to sell. Is that going to carry any weight?
It's an argument that they've been making, and it's actually not a bad argument. It's, in a way, less tied to the First Amendment and sort of tied to their argument that this is an unconstitutional bill of attainder. And you go back to your civics class, and you remember that this is one of the things that went into the Constitution that we wanted to change from England. It's the idea that a body like Congress legislatively can simply decide or single out someone for punishment. The problem here for TikTok is whether or not TikTok, as a foreign-owned company, has the same First Amendment rights and is protected against this kind of what it calls discrimination by Congress, especially in light of the fact that it comes from a particular country that is, in a way, a U.S. adversary. It's not just any country, it is China.
And what's the likelihood that this is going to all end up at the Supreme Court?
I think high to medium high. No matter what the circuit court decides here, I can see either side taking an appeal. And I can see this being an issue that the Supreme Court would be interested in taking up. But they're going to have to do so very quickly because the law goes into effect in January of 2025. That seems like a long ways from now, but in judicial time measuring, that is a blink of an eye. It could happen very quickly.
That is a century on TikTok. Danny Savalos, thanks so much. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, a potential cyclone is threatening the Carolina coast. NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns has more on that. Plus, we've got the latest on that torrential and deadly flooding happening across Central Europe. And welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. 2 New York Fire Department chiefs have been arrested, and they are facing federal bribery and corruption charges. It's part of that investigation into Mayor Eric Adams' administration. Now, the former chiefs are accused of taking over $100,000 in bribes while fast-tracking some safety inspections in return. The 2 former police officers were in court today in connection to the Uvalde school shooting. The former Uvalde officers had pre-trial hearings. Pete Arredondo and Adrian Gonzalez are facing counts of child endangerment over the 2022 shooting response. Both have pleaded not guilty. And a Missouri patient somehow contracted bird flu a few weeks ago, and now the CDC is saying a close contact has also become sick. Both did not have direct contact with dairy cows or poultry. They also say another contact developed some symptoms, but they are still investigating all that transmission. And Tito Jackson, one of the original Jackson 5 members, has passed away. Yesterday, Jackson was rushed to the hospital in Gallup, New Mexico, where he was pronounced dead. It's not clear how he died. The group of brothers shot to fame in the 1960s, and he later launched his solo career as a blues artist in 2003. Jackson was 70 years old. And Amazon is telling employees they have to return to the office 5 days a week. Corporate staffers will need to be in 5 days a week starting next year, and this is opposed to only having to come in 3 days a week. It comes as the company is simplifying its corporate structure, aiming for fewer managers and trying to remove some layers of the company. And just after the Gulf was hit last week by Hurricane Francine, another storm is causing destruction in North Carolina. There's record-breaking rainfall, washing out roads and stranding cars with water up to the windshields. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns gives us an update.
Gadi, just an incredible scene in North Carolina early today. I mean, it rained as hard there as you'll see anywhere in this country, really at any time. And this storm, although it's not tropical in nature, had a lot of energy and a lot of warmth from the ocean. Just put that into thunderstorms that weren't moving, and it just dumped historic amounts of rainfall. And from Wilmington southwards, especially around Carolina Beach, which is here, and then Oak Island, which is down here to the south, those areas just got crushed. And now we still have this huge shield of rain pushing all the way through areas of North Carolina with additional problems. But what happened this morning was just eye-opening. So these are personal weather stations, PWS, ones like you and I can buy and put on our house or our roof. And so they're not regulated, so we don't know exactly how accurate they are. But these are the highest ones I saw. It just gives you an idea of how crazy this rainfall was. Numerous locations over a foot, many between 15 to 20, and this one really stands out. They'll probably check this out to see if it verifies or not, because if it did, it would be a new 24-hour rainfall record in North Carolina. So we'll wait and see. But just, again, incredible rainfall rates. Some locations were reporting 4 to 6 inches in 1 hour. We still have numerous flash flood warnings. It hasn't even rained. The area that I just showed you all those totals from, that's this county here. It hasn't even rained there in about 6 hours, but there's so much water that has to move that is still under flash flood warning. Same with Jacksonville all the way to Fayetteville here. And now we've got people in even Virginia included in flash flood watches for rain that'll move your way later on tonight. So additional rainfall anywhere between, say, 2 to 4 inches. Isolated totals up to 6. A few spots here in northeast Virginia and also the mountains of North Carolina will get soaked later on tonight. Winds, we haven't had a lot of winds over, say, 45, maybe 55 miles per hour. On the coast, we did get one gust that was up to about 60, but we don't have a lot of wind damage. We don't have a lot of power outages. This is mostly just a rainfall story. Although there could be an isolated tornado later on this evening. That will be through the Outer Banks. We have that band of thunderstorms that's kicking up to the north. We haven't really had any. We only had one even tornado warning today. So I'm not expecting much, but an isolated case or two will occur. And again, not expecting anything with hail or maybe isolated wind damage too. And as far as what happens after this, we're going to watch it all moving inland, and then we're going to rain itself out in the mountains of North Carolina. That's one piece of it. But then another piece, almost like a cold front, heads up the coast, and we will see periods of rain tomorrow all the way to Washington, D.C. And then by the time we get to Wednesday, some of those scattered showers will try to move into areas like New Jersey. But the worst of it, Gadi, is happening right now. And what happened earlier today was eye-opening. You don't see rainfall totals like that very often. But then again, with climate change, it seems like we're seeing that more and more.
Eye-opening indeed. Bill Cairns, thank you. And coming up, a pipeline explosion is causing evacuations near Houston, Texas. We're going to take you there. But first, you got to see this. Meet Brooklyn. She's a dog, and sometimes dogs don't feel well, and she wasn't eating, so her owners took her to the vet, and it turns out she wasn't eating because she had already eaten too much. Too many socks to be exact, or 8 to be exact, too many rocks. We don't have the exact number of how many rocks, but also another toy was eaten. The vet says the 3-hour surgery to remove all of those things likely saved Brooklyn's life, which doesn't seem too far-fetched. Get it? Because of the fetching of the... We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. And here's some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. Brian Koberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students, was flown yesterday to Boise. That's where his murder trial will now take place, a decision that came after the state's Supreme Court moved it from Latah County, where the murders took place, and the trial is set for June. And the line fire here in California continues to rage through the San Bernardino National Forest as firefighters work to get it under control. The man accused of starting the fire appeared in court today to face multiple arson charges. The fire has already burned nearly 40,000 acres and right now is 42% contained. And Boeing workers in the Seattle area are still on strike after walking off the job last Friday. As pressure continues to mount, the company announced today it will freeze hiring, cut costs, and halt most of the orders of its top commercial planes. We'll see how the aviation giant, already under intense scrutiny for the safety of its planes, navigates the crisis in fresh talks that'll start later this week. And a disturbing story out of Texas. A medical school there has been dissecting, studying, and then leasing out the body parts of unclaimed people without the consent of the person or their family. But this after an NBC News investigation exposed its findings. The center has suspended the program. Our Liz Kreutz has more.
Victor Carl Honey was a U.S. military veteran who served in the Army for nearly a decade.
He was very friendly. He was outgoing, a nice dresser.
After being honorably discharged, he began struggling with mental illness and homelessness. Then in 2022, he died of an apparent heart attack while living alone on the streets of Dallas. Honey was entitled to a burial with military honors, but instead, something else happened.
I think they think, homeless black man, he ain't got no family. They don't care about him. You were wrong about this one.
An NBC News investigation has found that Honey was among more than 2,300 people who died in the Dallas-Fort Worth region and were given to a state medical school that used and made money off their body parts, at times as their own families searched for them. For Honey, within a month of his death, the Dallas Medical Examiner's Office deemed him unclaimed, reporting phones for family members they tried were disconnected. And yet, he did have relatives, some living right there in Dallas. His ex-wife, Kimberly, and their 2 adult children say they had even visited Honey in a hospital months prior to his death.
To hear that your ex-husband has been deemed an unclaimed person, what's your reaction to that?
That's crazy. We're here. We've always been here. His son has his same name. How could he be unclaimed?
This is where Victor Honey's body was then taken, the University of North Texas Health Science Center, where, according to government documents, his body was then frozen, cut into pieces, and sent out to different medical groups across the country, all without his prior consent or his family's knowledge.
Those documents show Honey's severed right leg sent to a Swedish medical device maker for $341. His torso shipped to a medical education company in Pittsburgh, which paid $900. And for $210, a pair of bones from his skull went to the U.S. Army for military medical training.
His right leg was sold.
Yes, ma'am.
His temporal bone, his torso.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think he would have wanted this?
No, he never wanted to be. The 10 years we were married, he never wanted to be an organ donor. We talked about it.
And Honey is not alone. NBC News reviewed thousands of pages of government records and data which reveal repeated failures to reach family members before declaring a body unclaimed. Our team has identified 12 cases in which families learned months or years later that a loved one had been provided to the medical school. 5 of those families found out what happened from NBC News, including Honey's, a year and a half after his death.
I don't believe they tried to find us. I don't believe they did. You can find people. NBC found me in a day. You can find people.
Why do you think they did it?
For money. They did it to him, a decorated military veteran. They'll do it to anybody. And that's not okay.
For 5 years, the University of North Texas Health Science Center has had agreements with Dallas and Tarrant counties to take their unclaimed bodies for free, saving them a combined $1 million a year in cremation and burial costs. It also helped the school, making it about $2.5 million a year by leasing body parts to outside groups, according to financial records.
Somebody needs to answer, or somebody's, for what they did, what they're doing.
For 10 months, our team has been seeking answers from both counties and the Health Science Center. All 3 declined our repeated requests for interviews, but in statements, the counties told us they would be reviewing their contracts. The Health Science Center at first defended its program, arguing using unclaimed bodies is critical in the training of future doctors. But just days before this story was set to air, it made a stunning reversal, telling NBC News it was suspending the program and firing the top officials who led it. Writing in a statement, as a result of the information brought to light through your inquiries, it has become clear that failures existed. They're hiring a consulting firm to investigate the program's operations.
My kids want answers. They want justice for their dad.
Honey's family recently received ashes that the county told them were his.
We don't believe those are his ashes, but we gave him and did what he deserved as a decorated military veteran.
And so, this summer, nearly 2 years after he died, the family finally laid Honey to rest.
You would think in this day's time, this doesn't happen here in America. But yeah, it does. It did.
And Liz Kreutz joins us now. Liz, some powerful reporting there. I'm scared to ask, but does it look like these were isolated cases?
Gadi, you know, it's hard to know because the fact of the matter is that this is legal in nearly every single state, this practice. Only a few states, Vermont being one of them, Minnesota as well as Hawaii, have banned this. But we don't have any national data on it, Gadi. And so that is something that actually our team at NBC is conducting a survey. 51 U.S. medical centers we've reached out to. 44 that responded said they don't use unclaimed bodies, but the rest either declined to answer or did not respond. So it's hard to know how much this is happening.
And Liz, what happens next? I mean, I get the medical needs here, but it sounds like things are changing very fast because of your investigation. Are there other less disturbing ways that those medical needs could be met?
Yeah, in fact, it's important. It's an important question because it's important to bring awareness that there are willed body donors. You can donate your body to science when you pass, and there are people that choose to do that. This is a case where they're doing it using people who have not consented to that. And so we did interview somebody who said, you know, I hope this story doesn't prevent people from donating their bodies because it is an important gift to give the medical community, if you feel that way, to allow it to donate it to science. The ethical question raised here, though, Gadi, is whether or not you should do it on someone who has not given that consent. And in terms of what's next, you know, these medical centers, they were getting these bodies for free and then being able to make money off of them or also use them in their own trainings. Now, essentially, if they were to have a training at the medical center, they would purchase a body from someone who has decided to donate their body to science.
I'm glad we're seeing changes because of your reporting. Thanks so much. And we've got some breaking news on tonight's lead story. Former President Trump is speaking at an X Spaces event right now. And for the first time, he is talking about what happened yesterday at the golf course and what the FBI is calling a second apparent assassination attempt. Let's take a quick listen.
It was quite something, but it worked out well, and Secret Service did an excellent job. And they have the man behind bars, and hopefully he's going to be there for a long time. Dangerous person, very, very dangerous person. So I was playing golf with some of my friends. It was on a Sunday morning, and very peaceful, very beautiful weather. Everything was beautiful. It was a nice place to be. And all of a sudden we heard shots being fired in the air, and I guess probably 4 or 5. And it sounded like bullets, but what do I know about that? But Secret Service knew immediately it was bullets. And they grabbed me. The agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. And what the gunfire was actually, interestingly, was a Secret Service agent had seen a barrel of a AK-47, which is a very powerful gun, rifle, and he started shooting at the barrel, started shooting in the bushes. Wow. Could only see the barrel. How good is that, right? There's something going on. I mean, perhaps it's God wanting me to be president to save this country.
The former president went on to say he thinks he needs more people in his security detail, something his campaign has reportedly brought up to the Secret Service today. And now to a massive inferno forcing evacuations in Texas. Let's take a look at these images right here. This is a pipeline explosion that is sending a giant pillar of flames and smoke high into the air. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson has more.
An explosion of flames consumed the skies in Deer Park, Texas, after officials say a natural gas pipeline erupted. What do you remember about this morning?
The boom. I mean, it was a loud explosion. It was a big fiery ball that went up to above those trees.
Behind Rosemarie Allen's home, flames and billowing black smoke. At least one firefighter has been injured, officials say. No word on how many structures may be damaged or destroyed.
A lot of the house structures that are adjacent to that are still catching on fire.
It keeps getting bigger.
Homes, schools, and several businesses ordered to evacuate. This video showing just how close the flames were to shopping centers. Students at nearby San Jacinto College forced to shelter in place.
It was just scary because I was like, what if it explodes again?
The cause of the inferno remains under investigation, officials say. The owner of the pipeline, Energy Transfer, saying in a statement an unknown car may have hit a pipeline valve. Officials say they've turned the pipeline off, but tonight the community still on edge.
It will be hours, if not into tonight or tomorrow. It'll be a while before it goes out.
Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, Deer Park, Texas.
Priscilla, thank you. And coming up, in Central Europe, thousands have been displaced because of torrential flooding there. And now there is more rain on the way. We're going to have the latest on that for you and more headlines trending around the world when we return. So stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. An IDF investigation into the deaths of 3 Israeli hostages last November found that they were likely mistakenly killed by an Israeli airstrike, and that strike was aimed at a Hamas commander. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces say that the hostages were being held in a tunnel at the time of the airstrike. Their bodies were recovered roughly a month later. And over the weekend, thousands of people in Uganda paid their respects to Rebecca Cheptegei. She was an Olympic athlete who was allegedly set on fire by her ex-boyfriend and later died from that attack. Cheptegei was a sergeant in Uganda's army, and she was buried with full military honors. And a new Mexican law is causing a bit of controversy. Mexico's Senate voted last week to make all judges stand for election. Until now, they've been nominated or appointed directly. Mexico's current president signed it into law yesterday, saying it will help stop corruption in the Justice Department. But opposing parties are worried it may actually encourage bribery and intimidation by cartels to try to gain influence. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, over 30 people have been killed by dangerous floods sweeping through the nation, with many struggling to get medical care. Aid organizations are now warning about the spread of waterborne diseases. UN says floods in West and Central Africa have displaced millions in the last month, killing over 400 people. And while those in Nigeria are still reeling from floods, those in Central Europe are now dealing with them as well. Torrential rains from this weekend have caused disastrous flooding across the region. And while more rain could be on its way this week, the havoc already wreaked across Europe has left many trying to pick up the pieces of what's left. Take a look. Days of heavy rain has caused widespread flooding across Central Europe. At least 17 people have been killed as Storm Boris has devastated the region, ravaging towns and knocking out power. In Romania, entire neighborhoods and villages have been submerged.
Am distrus tot, n-am nimic, paturile sunt pline.
One villager in Gadi County lost her pets and livestock in addition to her home.
La noapte în mașini afară pe stradă. Păi de n-avem unde.
Across Central Europe, tens of thousands of people have been asked to evacuate.
No museli sme se vystěhovat, protože jsme v záplavové zóně. Teď musíme čekat, až to klesne trochu. Nejde voda, elektrika, špatně.
In Poland, officials say at least 5 people have died. The surging water levels collapsing bridges and breaching dams, leaving behind a trail of destruction.
Płytki pozrywało, podłogi pozrywało, ściany poprzewracało. Można zobaczyć tu nawet przez okno sfotografować. Ściany są poprzewracane.
56-year-old Darek watched his home filled with water on Sunday. His son says his room no longer exists and everything is gone.
Straty są niewyobrażalne są dla miasta. Mosty wszystkie są popękane. No to jest, miasto wygląda jak apokalipsa. Tak jak ja to nazwę, to jest miasto widmo tak naprawdę.
Today, Polish officials declaring a national disaster, setting up shelters in schools and community centers. Meanwhile, in Austria, the capital of Vienna has also been hard hit.
I've never seen
fighting like this. We're on a cruise and we're stuck for days where the boat's not even moving.
But the main concern is dams threatening to overflow.
The fact that the roads are closed and the bus system is all shut down practically, and I have to find another way to get home is stressful.
As the impacts continue to be felt across Central Europe, Boris isn't done yet. Hungary and Slovakia are preparing for the next wave, where more heavy rain and more flooding is expected. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. What does a future without TikTok look like? Well, maybe similar to what they have in China. We're going to take a look at the TikTok-ish app making waves there, where TikTok is already illegal in the country where its owners live. And tonight in the future of everything, imagining a world without TikTok in China, that's already the case. So what does that look like here? Another social video app. Douyin is owned by ByteDance. It is a staple of the Chinese internet right now, but with censors and limitations for young users. As NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer shows us, it's also spurred its own creator economy.
TikTok is popular around the world, but here it's Douyin that dominates the Chinese internet. Both are owned by Beijing-based ByteDance. With more than 700 million active users, Douyin showcases everything from dance moves to makeovers, from overeating to herding sheep. It's the go-to of nearly a dozen heavily censored video platforms here, like Xiaohongshu, Kuaishou, and Bilibili. Douyin turned executive chef Xia Tian into a short video star.
Welcome to China. Welcome to Beijing.
With more than 50 million followers across Chinese platforms who tune in for tips on home cooking and culture, his viewers can interact in real time. How popular are you? And don't be modest.
I
wouldn't say I'm super famous, he says. I just think I'm doing the right thing. What makes ByteDance apps like Douyin and TikTok so popular is that their algorithms learn what users like and then feed an endless stream of content. And that's where U.S. national security concerns come in. Under laws here, China's government can order any Chinese company like ByteDance to hand over user data. TikTok CEO told Congress last year they never have and never will.
I have seen no evidence that the Chinese government has access to that data.
The bill President Biden signed could shut down TikTok in the U.S. unless ByteDance sells it to a U.S. company. But China's government can veto any sale under national security laws here on selling certain technologies, like those algorithms.
What is China's position on this, and should Americans be concerned about their privacy?
Chinese officials have repeatedly accused the U.S. of suppressing foreign companies, likening it to a witch hunt. ByteDance doesn't share its financials, though some estimates put revenues at $120 billion last year, most of it generated here in China. That short videos are a staple of daily life has given rise to a whole industry in China. Lu Fuxiang's agency specializes in content for lawyers who give advice on marriage and family law. Douyin expanded everyone's social circle, he says. Officially, more than 1 billion people are short video users here, and with stricter screen limits. Douyin has parental controls that ban teenagers from appearing in live streams and limits them to 40 minutes a day on the app and only at certain hours. Chinese users need a VPN to access the TikTok scene in the U.S. I think if Americans lost TikTok, he says, they'd probably miss out on a lot of fun.
All right, that does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.